Hi everyone, welcome to the first of my practical CNC videos where I address a specific problem posted by one of my fellow Shapeoko users in the unofficial Shapeoko and Nomad users group. Today we'll be looking at a problem posted by Dylan Northrup. Dylan would like to create a 3-layered cut where some text sits proud of a frame and the frame sits proud of an inner pocketed area. I'll be taking you through setting this project up in Carbide Create so you can do a similar project yourself. Here in Carbide Create, I've set up a 15 by 15 inch workspace that's half an inch thick. I've set my toolpath 0 to the lower left. I've set this up as a hardwood project, and I've left most of the other settings intact. I have set it explicitly to a 1/4 inch spacing on the grid. We'll begin by replicating Dylan's basic design. I'll start by creating a square most of the size of the work area. I'll set its dimensions by hand to 14 inches and center it in the work area. A second square can act as the inner frame. And I manually set the inner frame to 12 inches. Next, we'll create some text to overlap the two. And we'll size and position it so it looks similar to Dylan's concept. I've chosen to overlap the text a little more than Dylan did just to emphasize the effect, but the idea is the same and the text could be positioned elsewhere. Reviewing Dylan's original design, he'd like the text to be the highest point, cut to 1/10 of an inch below the surface of the material. We can easily set up the toolpath for this by selecting our outer square, choosing to create a contour toolpath. I'm going to use a 1/8 inch end mill because of the size of this project, and we're simply going to set the start depth to 0 and the maximum depth to 1/10 of an inch, and select the pocket offset. We'll call this flattened to 0.1 inch. Changing the toolpath simulation to MDF, we can show the simulation and see that our pocket cut will create an indentation 1/10 of an inch thick. This currently represents the highest point on our workpiece. Our second cut is to be between the outer and inner frame, but it should not cut anywhere the text is. To do this, we can simply select all 3 elements, go to the toolpath area, and choose to do a contour pocketing operation between these vectors, and we'll cut to 2.2 inches. Though the screen has become a bit of a mess, you can see that it is planning to cut around the text. Once again, reviewing our simulation, we can look at the progress we've made. We now have our text cut to 1/10 of an inch, and the area between the outer and inner frame cut to 2/10 of an inch. The final cut does require an extra step. Let's look at that next. Back in the design area, we can see that we want to pocket the inner frame, but we don't want to cut anywhere the letters are. To accomplish this, we're going to need to perform a Boolean operation. Boolean operations allow you to merge shapes, subtract shapes, and perform other operations on them. The one we're interested in today is a subtraction. In order to do this, we have to complete one step first. We need a copy of our text, and we want it to be in the same location. We'll start by selecting the text and using the Ctrl-C shortcut on the keyboard to copy it, but you can see it's moved our text. By clicking on our original text, we can see its X and Y coordinates. If we make note of these, or even just use copy and paste, we can go to our new text, enter in 7.4 for the X, and I'll paste in the value for Y, and once I've applied it, the text is now sitting on top of each other. Now I can perform my Boolean operation. I'm going to start by selecting the shape I want to subtract from, in this case the inner frame. I'm going to hold Ctrl and choose the copy I just made, and then I will perform a subtraction. It's not immediately obvious what happened, but if I move the frame, you'll see exactly what happened. The inner frame has had the shapes of the letters subtracted from it. It's now a complex piece of geometry based on our text. Placing it back in position, we can now set up our final toolpath. Selecting our inner frame, creating a contour toolpath, choosing pocket, and choosing our final depth of 3/10 of an inch, we now have 3 tiers. So let's look at our simulation. This is very close. Zooming in, you can see a clear delineation. Our text is at 1/10 of an inch, our outer frame is at 2/10 of an inch, and our inner frame is at 3/10 of an inch. In fact, the only problem I can see is that the inner portion of some of the letters, specifically the O's and the G, hasn't been cut. This was a minor oversight that we can easily fix. If we zoom into our design, we can actually see that the Boolean operation left us with several additional shapes. These islands were isolated from the inner shape when the Boolean operation occurred. And the repair for this is quite simple. We're simply going to edit our third toolpath, and in addition to cutting the inner frame, we will hold Control and select the 3 shapes that were overlooked the first time. Allowing the simulation to calculate one final time, we now have our completed project. This project wouldn't quite be ready to cut. You can see that the 1/8 inch end mill is unable to get into these small detailed areas. If this was my project, I would go back and modify the text, trying a different font, a different size, or perhaps bolding the font. Anything that separates the letters slightly more should allow the bit to fit between. Nonetheless, this is how you can create complex multi-tiered geometry based on text or other shapes in your project. Thank you for watching, and if you found this video helpful, please consider liking it or subscribing to my channel.